On April 28, 1945, as Berlin collapsed into smoke and rubble, a man was dragged into the garden of the Reich Chancellery. His name was Hermann Fegelein. 8 hours earlier, he had been an SS general, decorated, powerful, married into Hitler's inner circle. 8 hours later, he would be dead, shot in disgrace, stripped of his rank, reduced from elite officer to sobbing prisoner. Witnesses said he cried, begged, pleaded. He had been caught trying to flee Berlin in civilian clothes while the Red Army closed in. To Adolf Hitler, in the final hours of the Third Reich, that was unforgivable. Fegelein was executed not for war crimes, not for atrocities, not for murder. He was killed for betrayal. And here is the irony history rarely confronts. 8 hours after ordering Fegelein's execution, Hitler married Eva Braun, Fegelein's sister-in-law. In killing Hermann Fegelein, Hitler executed his own future brother-in-law. But that execution, often portrayed as a symbol of Nazi collapse, was not the darkest secret attached to the Fegelein name. Not even close, because while one brother died in the garden, another walked free after orchestrating the murder of more than 14,000 people in 12 days. And the family, far from being destroyed, quietly survived the war. This is not the story people expect. This is the story of who paid and who didn't. Most people believe that Nazi families were crushed after the war, their wealth confiscated, their names ruined, their lives dismantled by tribunals and public shame. Sometimes that happened, but the Fegelein family exposes a far darker truth about post-war justice, one that is uncomfortable, uneven, and often non-existent. When Hermann Fegelein died in that garden, he left behind 3 things: pregnant wife Gretl, a younger brother Waldemar, and a daughter who had not yet been born. Each would experience the end of the Third Reich very differently. 7 days after Hermann Fegelein was executed, his wife Gretl Fegelein gave birth in Zell am See, Austria. She named her daughter Eva Barbara. The name was deliberate. Eva, after her sister Eva Braun, who had died 5 days earlier in the Führerbunker beside Hitler. The child was born into ashes, into silence, into a legacy she had no power to reject. By May 8, 1945, Germany surrendered. Allied forces poured through Germany and Austria, arresting thousands. Wives, secretaries, associates, anyone remotely connected to the Nazi hierarchy was interrogated. But when investigators reached Gretl Fegelein, they made a decision that would shape the rest of her life. They labeled her peripheral. She was not Emmy Goring, not Magda Goebbels, not a woman who gave speeches or posed beside power. She was simply a widow with a newborn. And so Hitler's own sister-in-law walked free. No tribunal, no denazification court, no punishment. But her escape went further than freedom. Before Allied authorities could seize Nazi assets, Gretl quietly hid Eva Braun's most valuable possessions at Schloss Fischhorn, an Austrian castle near Zell am See. Not costume jewelry, real gems, personal letters between Hitler and Eva, photo albums, home movies filmed by Eva herself, footage of Nazi leaders laughing, relaxing, living ordinary lives far from the death camps. The Allies never found them. While Europe starved and millions wandered homeless, Gretl preserved a fortune and the private archive of the Nazi elite. By 1954, Gretl Fegelein no longer existed. On February 6th of that year, she married Kurt Berlinghoff, a Munich businessman. She took his name, shed her past, reinvented herself. No interviews, no memoirs, no testimony. For 33 years, she remained silent. She had attended her wedding at the Berghof in 1944 with Hitler as guest of honor. She had lived inside the regime's inner circle. She knew things historians would spend decades reconstructing from fragments. She told no one. When Gretl Berlinghoff died in 1987 at age 72, rumors spread of deathbed confessions. There were none. She was buried quietly, her secrets intact. But she was not the only Fegelein to evade justice. Hermann Fegelein had a younger brother, Waldemar Fegelein. Where Hermann rose through charm and proximity to power, Waldemar built his career in blood. In 1941, on the Eastern Front, Waldemar commanded SS cavalry units in the Pripyat marshes of Belarus. These were not combat units. They were mobile killing squads. Their mission was anti-partisan operations. The reality was mass murder. Villages surrounded. Families assembled. Men, women, children marched to pits or driven into swamps and shot. Waldemar documented it all. In August 1941 alone, his reports listed 14,178 Jews killed, 1,001 alleged partisans, 699 Red Army soldiers. 12 days, his signature on every report. This was one of the largest mass murder operations before the extermination camps reached full industrial scale. And yet, when the war ended, Waldemar Fegelein was never arrested. He changed his name, disappeared, waited. Waldemar resurfaced as Axel Fegelein in Bavaria. He returned to what the family had always known: horses. He ran a riding stable near Bad Wurishofen, married a woman named Anneliese, had 5 children. At some point, he stopped hiding altogether. He used his real name again. No one came. No investigators. No prosecutors. No trials. The documentation of his crimes sat quietly in archives while he lived freely in democratic West Germany. He died in 2000 at the age of 88. In his own bed. Never charged with a single crime. The only person who truly paid was the one who had no choice. Eva Fegelein never knew her father. He was executed days before her birth. She carried the name of Hitler's companion, the niece of a woman who chose death beside the Führer, the daughter of a man executed for cowardice. Albert Speer later called Hermann Fegelein one of the most disgusting figures in Hitler's circle. That reputation followed her everywhere. Historians now call this intergenerational trauma, the psychological burden inherited by children of perpetrators. Eva Barbara didn't commit crimes. She inherited consequences. On April 25, 1971, nearly 30 years after her father's execution, Eva Barbara took her own life. She was 26 years old. The echo was impossible to ignore. 2 brothers, 2 fates. Here is the truth the Fegelein story exposes. One brother was executed for desertion. The other murdered 14,000 civilians and lived free. Justice, it turns out, was selective. Hermann Fegelein betrayed Hitler. Waldemar Fegelein betrayed humanity. Only one paid. The photographs Gretl Fegelein hid did not vanish with her silence. Years later, they surfaced quietly, almost accidentally, and became some of the most intimate historical records of the Nazi elite ever recovered. Home movies, private letters, smiling faces far removed from the machinery of death. Her silence saved her life, but the objects she preserved became evidence, revealing how ordinary, how human, the architects of atrocity allowed themselves to feel while millions were being erased. The Fegelein family was not destroyed by the war. That assumption is comforting. It suggests balance, consequences, justice. Reality was Messier. The family was transformed, not punished. A widow slipped into anonymity and lived out her years untouched by tribunals. A mass murderer returned to the countryside, raised children, trained horses, and died in his own bed after decades of freedom. And the only person who paid fully was the one who had no agency at all. A daughter born into a name that functioned like a sentence, who carried a legacy she never chose until it finally broke her. When we speak about post-war justice, we point to trials, verdicts, and gallows. We name Nuremberg. We recite sentences and dates. But history is shaped just as much by what never happened. By investigations that were never opened. By files that were never pursued. By men who were never summoned, never questioned, never forced to explain the numbers they signed their names beneath. Hermann Fegelein was executed for trying to escape Adolf Hitler in the final hours of a collapsing regime. His crime was personal betrayal. His brother escaped responsibility for the systematic murder of more than 14,000 people. And in the silence that followed the war, in the comfortable years that came after, no one ever came looking. That is what remains.